another interview for your Conscious Pregnancy and Parenting Guide. And today I am here with Daniel Vitalis, forager extraordinaire, and a man on a mission to teach us, I think, how to rewild our lives and rewild the planet as a result. And I've just had the pleasure of listening to Daniel for the past 3 days, listening to his vast knowledge, and very vast, and I think probably to the tip of the iceberg, I'm sure, of what he knows. But just his knowledge about how we can reclaim our health and get it back to the level that it once was at, and that is when it was normal to be healthy and thriving and not diseased and falling apart and degenerating. He spent a lot of time, from what I can tell, researching and learning and really fully experiencing all that he teaches. So I feel really blessed to be able to be speaking personally with another passionate person who's truly making a profound impact in this world. Daniel's information is really powerful, but it's really practical. I went home and made sauerkraut immediately that night in like 10 minutes. It was that fast, pretty much. So it's really powerful and it's empowering, and it gives us the understanding that we can be powerful in this very quickly changing world. I have been following Daniel for some time now. I've been recommending his information and his websites to clients, to friends for quite some time. So if you don't know Daniel, I think it's about time that you do. And you can check him out at danielvitalis.com. And you can also go to sirthrival.com, and we'll have those websites up on the course site for you. Where at sirthrival.com you can learn about his products and really get in touch with some products that will help you truly thrive in your world. Also, you can go to YouTube and watch a whole bunch of interviews, interesting, fun, informative interviews with Daniel. Learn heaps of information on a bunch of topics. So thank you, Daniel, for being here today. Really appreciate it.
A lovely introduction.
Oh, well, thank you. So, okay, let's get started. Let's just talk about, I know you've been on quite the journey. You've been on a journey of veganism, raw foodism, vegetarianism, and you're absolutely not that now. So tell us a little bit about your journey to where you got today.
Well, when I was about 15 years old, I got exposed to some ideas that maybe nutrition could actually affect who we are. That's so obvious to me now that to say that, like that I discovered that idea for myself seems almost like really immature and silly, but now, like looking at the world at large, I see that for a lot of people, the idea that you could change yourself, fundamentally change yourself with food, is a completely foreign idea to people. They are living in such a way out in the masses, as if you could just eat genetically modified food and completely refined foods and chemically laden foods with impunity, and it wouldn't have an effect on who you are. And now what I understand is it's not really that I changed myself with food, that I actually restored myself with food, and that who I've become is actually who I was, but that had been dampened down and actually degenerating away from the lifestyle that unfortunately was just, I guess, was the norm. I grew up in that 80s and the 90s in the United States, and it was just, it was white bread, it was Wonder Bread, and it was Twinkies, and it was Pop-Tarts, and that was my reality. So that led me to get into the ideas of vegetarianism and the ideas of Whole Foods, and that led me into the idea, that was when Whole Foods was not a store, but a concept. That led me, of course, into the thing you mentioned, which was veganism and raw foodism, and I approached all of that stuff with a lot of fervor. And I've really come full circle today because my interest in my study for the last couple of years has been in, and I think the question that was motivating all this, let me say this first, was what's the natural diet for human beings, in the same way that we could find the natural diet of chimpanzees or whales or walruses, and we could understand that if we were to feed that animal its natural diet, it would thrive better than on a diet that it wasn't developed for over the span of its evolution. I was curious what was the diet of our species, and I chased that down until I finally realized that I could look to the indigenous people around the world to see what they had eaten all through time, that it allowed them, and I think it brings us full circle to the meaning of this interview, what they were doing was feeding themselves not just to develop themselves, but to develop generation after generation of healthy children. And so we can actually look to the indigenous people to not only find out what our natural diet is, but what natural diet will actually keep a people regenerating flawlessly nearly flawlessly. I mean without cavities, I mean without diabetes, I mean without cancer, and without heart disease. These diseases don't exist amongst the indigenous people. So now what I'm really interested in is how do I model not just my diet, but my entire lifestyle after the lifestyle and diet of the indigenous people from all around the world, and how do I share that with other people so that people can approximate that? I say that because we don't actually have a world where we can go backward to sort of who we used to be. That's not going to happen. So what we can do, I think, is just like a chimp in a zoo can have a habitat that resembles its natural habitat and a diet that resembles its natural diet, even though it's living in a kind of captivity, whilst we live in this sort of, I think, really social captivity in a lot of ways, we can at least approximate our natural habitat, our natural food, and that can get us back on course so we can regenerate properly, effectively, rather than continue to degenerate ourselves into a point of such a disease state that really right now I think it's a pivotal moment. We're right on the precipice. The question is, will humanity actually be able to continue living on the planet? A lot of people think that sounds crazy, but take a look at the birth rates, take a look at the cancer rates, take a look at the heart disease rates. That the media loves to sort of placate us and keep this information sort of on the sidelines of what they give us. But I think it's getting obvious now. This is the generation that has to make some serious choices about how we live, how we eat, how we reproduce, so that we can continue on to our bright future.
Right, and I think that's so key because, what you say is that a lot of what we're doing now isn't going to show up until the next generation or the generation after that, and we're already seeing problems in this generation with so many key things. So what does that mean for the next generation? That's kind of scary. So, okay, so how is your knowledge pertinent to families and raising truly healthy children? What have you learned around that? How does that come into play?
What I've learned is that, again, if we were to go to indigenous people and take a look at how they rear their families, and I think if we could do it in a non-judgmental way where we don't have to project onto them how we define family units, how we define marriages, how we define what a family we think should look like, but instead really look at like how does a man and a woman come together, reproduce and rear a healthy child. If we could keep just the framework of family so that we don't project cultural biases, what we would see is that so much of how people live on the planet indigenously or pre-industrially might be a more comfortable word for some people. If you said, hey, why do you do this? Why do you eat this? Why do you pursue this? For our children, for healthy children. What I see is going on now, I mean, there's a lot of politics around the family that I don't think is really the scope of this interview, but just nutritionally, families today are having a difficult time bringing forth a child with a fully formed bone structure. You might be saying, well, what do you mean? I have all my bones. Well, how are the bones in your mouth? Do they fit in your mouth? Do they overlap each other? Do some stick to the sides? Do some poke through the back? Did you have room for your wisdom teeth? Now, this isn't to say, hey, you've got a problem. The thing is to say, hey, look, we almost all do. In fact, it's very difficult to find a human being whose palate can actually accommodate all their teeth anymore. This is not the way of nature. In fact, if we look at indigenous people and pre-industrial people, we see that they have fully formed dental arches. We see that they have broad cheekbones as opposed to us today. Now, how does that impact a family? So you bring forth a child and the child's skull hasn't fully formed and the teeth are just symptomatic of that. Well, what's that mean for then the brain case, as an example? How irritating might it be if your brain can't be accommodated by your brain case? Could this cause a sort of attention deficit? Could this create children who are sort of uncomfortable in their own skin? I mean, if the brain doesn't even fit in the head. And now where we're at is using psychopharmacology on our children, aren't we? So rather than address any of our underlying symptoms, and rather than address our children with food and with nutrition, we see that indigenous people would prepare a woman for a couple of years before her pregnancy, right? So, you're a young woman, you're ready to maybe think about having a child. There's a diet that you'd go on to prepare you, to give you such rich nutrition that you can form this child's nervous system. Then after birth, there'd be another process of feeding to prepare to reestablish everything that was passed on to your child. These things are gone now. We're giving birth to children of such low nutritional diets, our diets, and then feeding them such low nutrition diets, the children are literally mad. They're literally gone mad, and so we use now psychopharmacology on so many children, then to dope them down, so they're very drugged up today, and this leads them into just, it's a downward spiral, as you know. Age 13, kids are crushing their Ritalin pills and snorting them, right, in the school bathroom. I mean, how far do we go with this?
Right.
So what does it mean for families? It means you can end this cycle.